President Biden heads to the State Department and lays out his vision for U.S. foreign policy. The U.S. Senate voted on amendments through the night, bringing Democrats one step closer to passing President Biden's COVID relief package. And in the latest Associated Press poll, Joe Biden's job approval rating is at 61%. That's quite high.
Willie, I'm not really good at this politics thing. I haven't been following it much. Is that usually where presidents are?
No, not right out of the gate like that. It's 61% in a divided nation. So he's putting his head down and trying to avoid the fight that's happening over impeachment in the United States Senate, and to show that he's getting things done. And that continued overnight, as Mika said, with another step toward the passage of this massive COVID relief bill that the American people are waiting for.
Yeah, and the thing is, again, David Drucker, even among conservatives that I know who voted for Donald Trump, and when I was talking to so many of my friends and family members, I'm like, you're voting for him, why? They always started by saying, he exhausts me. I'm just so exhausted. I wish he'd shut up. I wish he'd go away. I wish he'd just sign bills. There was such an exhaustion. I wonder when we see anywhere from 49 to 61% approval rating with Joe Biden, if it's not even some moderates out there, maybe some moderate Republicans that didn't vote for Joe Biden, who's just like, God, you know what? It's really good to be able to have dinner with the family and not be talking about the latest crazed, dangerous thing coming out of Washington, D.C.
Right, and I think that was one of the things that hurt President Trump in the campaign, especially with the coronavirus, is that voters, at least voters in the right places that mattered in the presidential election, wanted to see some competent management, and they wanted to have this idea that somebody at the top was leading and taking care of everything. And for a lot of voters, they couldn't get that sense from President Trump because he was constantly blaming governors, blaming mayors for problems happening with the virus and the pandemic. And he wasn't telling everybody, I'm taking care of it. Here's step one, step two, step three. And the interesting thing about voters, sometimes they will overlook, and we've seen this with a lot of approval ratings with governors, at least over the first 6 to 7 to 8 months of the pandemic, even if things aren't going well and the things that they're doing, that a politician is doing, is not working, if they get the sense that you're being upfront with them about the problem, that you're trying to fix it and you're taking steps and that you're in charge, they're going to give you a lot of leeway, and they're actually going to feel good about the job you're doing. Over time, they will start to look at the results, and over time, they will start to look at the agenda a little bit deeper. And over time, voters might get upset, and you might see approval ratings change. We've seen that with certain governors. In California, right. Governor Newsom is one example of that. But right out of the gate, Joe Biden is producing a different style of management than his predecessor, and people feel like he is taking steps to fix the problem. And if they can feel like there is progress, then this sort of reaction from voters will continue. If they begin to feel like he's not getting the job done, then we'll start to see some angst from voters, and he'll have to deal with that.
Yeah. Well, I think as far as Gavin Newsom goes, Gene Robinson, a lot of that has to do with the timing of his dining choices. But also, one thing that you see that has surprised me, I always thought we needed to stay in Paris. As a conservative, I thought we needed to stay in the Paris Accords. It's very interesting looking at some of these presidential orders that he signed. I was thinking, okay, well, that's going to be 50-50. I mean, that's going to divide the country. A lot of these things that he signed already are like 70-30 issues, 80-20 issues. They're sexual orientation, discrimination, whatever that part of his agenda that he signed. I was like, okay, that's a 50-50. Because we heard an awful lot from the right on that. I think that clocked in at 75-25, 80-20. People are like libertarians on that, saying, come on. Yeah. So a lot of these things that we've heard are going to be so divisive through the years are actually 70-30 issues.
Yeah, they are. And, I think the other thing people are reacting to, Joe, is what actual government looks like. It's not a bunch of crazy tweets. It's actual serious actions, whether executive orders, proposed legislation, things moving pretty much through some sort of regular order. There are updates by the scientists and the doctors on coronavirus. President Biden comes out and explains his policies and what he's trying to accomplish, and how he's trying to help people, how he's trying to help communities and families across the nation. And of course, yes, it's one thing to explain how you're trying to do it. It's another thing to actually deliver. But just the sort of normalness and peacefulness and sort of non-craziness of this administration, I think, is reflected in that 61% figure. It's like people are starting to remember, oh, yeah, this is what it's supposed to be like. It's not supposed to be the way it was the last 4 years.
Hey, thanks so much for watching our YouTube channel. You can follow up on today's top stories and breaking news, or catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.